courtyard and built on 2 side wings. It seemed absurd for one man to live alone in such an enormous building, but no one in the family had been brave enough to criticize Sir Edward. Most of them lived far away, and his only son was serving in the army in India. His daughter, Alena, since the age of 16, had been educated at the most select seminary for young ladies in Florence. Because it was a long way to return home for the holidays, she had spent time with her friends in France and other countries of Europe, and this had certainly enhanced her education and use of languages. But her absence had made her completely unaware of her father's financial position. Because of his 2 magnificent houses and the way he lived, she had always imagined him to be enormously rich. Now she and her brother were told that there was nothing left but the houses and their contents, all of which were entailed on the new baronet, and in turn onto his son, if he could ever afford to have one. Alena, at 18, was very lovely. In fact, ethereal was usually the word most people used to describe her. She had sat silent while Mr. Lawson read out their father's will, her lovely face inscrutable. She now found that it was impossible to find words to express her feelings. "I suppose," her brother asked after a long pause in which he had been thinking deeply, "I am not allowed to sell the house in London?" "That is entailed too, Sir Robin, so I would suggest that you rent it out. But it is very large, and since it has not been lived in for several years, it will require a great deal of restoration." "Which of course I cannot afford." Mr. Lawson nodded. "And what about the estate?" The solicitor, who was a kindly man, sighed. "I am afraid that 2 years ago your father sold the few hundred acres that were not entailed. The rest, like the garden, the stables, and of course the private racecourse, which are all still in very bad repair, are also entailed." Sir Robin and his sister had already been informed that the Dunstead trustees, one of whom was Mr. Lawson himself, came round once a month to make sure that everything was intact and in place. What was really outstanding about Dunstead House was its magnificent collection of pictures that were always the envy of every art collector. But from where she was sitting now, Alena could see a picture by Rembrandt, another by Frans Hals, and a third, which she had always especially loved, by Raphael. It was his famous picture of St. George and the Dragon. It passed dramatically through her mind now that if anyone had a dragon to fight, it was her brother, his dragon being the misery of complete poverty. She looked up at the Raphael as she pondered their situation. St. George, mounted on his rearing white horse, was not unlike Robin, and the dragon, with its long black wings and its snarling mouth, appeared as horrifying as everything they had been told by Mr. Lawson. As if he had nothing more to say, and found it hard to control his feelings, Robin rose from his seat. He walked to the mullioned window and looked out at the garden. He remembered it being perfectly kept with smooth green lawns and well-kept flower-beds. He was not surprised to see that the lawns needed cutting, and the flower-beds appeared to have more weeds in them than flowers. During his father's illness, the solicitors, realizing the family's dire financial position, had cut down the staff, so that in the house and on the estate there were as few men and women employed as possible. Sir Robin had already discovered that the majority of the staff were old, and they had been prepared to stay on for only a small wage, because they had nowhere else to go. But they were all far too old to keep the place in the perfect order he remembered from the days of his youth. His father had been quite unable to communicate with anyone, and Robin had therefore not come home earlier, as he now thought he should have done. The Viceroy had begged him to stay on in India because of his excellent work, and he now realized that while he had wanted to stay, he should have returned home. But even if he had, he told himself firmly, it would have been too late for him to stop the rot, far too late to prevent every penny his father possessed being squandered. He most certainly had not expected that everything saleable would have been sold. He could see now why there was an empty space on each side of the marble fireplace, where there had been